Hi everyone. So I wanted to share something that I recently did that ended up working out pretty well, and it was making custom toe pads out of silicone mold. You can buy kits to do this, but my feet are pretty hard to match, hard to fit with pads, and I don't like a lot of pad, and so I struggled with it a little bit, but I didn't want to invest a bunch of money in a toe pad, like spend $50 on making custom toe pads if it didn't work for me. So I basically tried to find a way of doing it myself so I could get an idea if it was something that I would want to pursue for my particular foot shape in the future. Anyways, so I will tell you what you need to create your custom toe pads, and then I'll walk you through. I'm not actually going to do it, but I'll walk you through what you do in order to create these. So first of all, you're going to need to get 2-part silicone non-toxic putty. So it molds together, it's a 2-part mix. So you have part A and part B, you take equal amounts and you knead them together, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So you can get this at the craft store. I bought mine at Michael's. You can order it online. It's called Amazing Mold Putty. And it's totally non-toxic. You can make molds for like chocolate and stuff, which I like because I don't like chemicals on my skin if it can be avoided. So that's your first ingredient or supply from your supply list. You also need 2 ankle socks as thin as possible. So, if you can get really thin to where you can like see through them, not nylon thin because that'll rip, but actual sock, like knit material, but as thin as possible. You need 2 of those, and then you need oil of some kind. I'm using some weird essential oil blend or whatever, but it's just to put on your feet so your feet don't stick in the insoles when you are molding them. And then you'll need some sort of plastic, clear, thin plastic bag. You could use like cheap sandwich bags. I think Ziploc would be too thick. This is actually like a hair thing. I use like a tent that is temporary and non-toxic, no chemicals again, and I have a bunch of these left over because I don't really like to put those on the hip. So anyways, so 1 of those, and then you need whatever point shoes you're going to be using that you would like your mold to fit in, because every shoe is slightly different, and you can't, that's the thing, you have to kind of know what shoe you want to be in, because you would have to make new insoles if you change shoe models. Like if they're really close, maybe it'd be okay, but I would say more likely than not you'd need to make a new mold. Okay, so let's get started and I'll show you kind of what we do. So first I would oil your hands and your feet, and I'd put a towel down under you because it's gross if you get oil everywhere, but you want just a little bit of oil on your hands, not too much. And then you take equal parts of A and B, and you'll knead them together, right? Not for too long because it starts to set up after about like 30 to 60 seconds. So you knead them till you get even color, because you've got yellow and white and you want it to create like pale yellow or a shade in between whatever 2 colors of the mold you have. And then you have your socks, and you, I should have mentioned this, I apologize, but you want to previously cut your socks so they're about the length of your previous toe pad, just so you have an idea. But yeah, so you pre-cut your socks. That's something to, sorry. And then you will take the putty and you will place it just barely above your toes. Here, I'm trying to show you, in front, like wrap it around. You don't really need to put a lot under here because it kind of naturally goes there, but I put a little bit under there. I actually ended up having way too much on top. So if I was to do it again, I would use way less putty. I would say if you're gonna mix these and you're doing 1 at a time, maybe at the most a golf ball size, and then you'll be pulling out the extra because you don't want it to be too thick around your foot. And that was my biggest mistake, is I felt like this here was like keeping me from rolling through, which is why I would do it differently when I do it again. So anyways, yeah, so you put the putty around thin on top through your toes, and then just slightly underneath. And then you will take your cut sock, and then you put it, and your feet are oiled, and you put it on. Now if you have a toe spacer, you'd want to put the toe spacer in before you want your toe spacer oiled, which is different than the company that makes these but it worked fine. So I didn't want to do the extra toe spacer steps. So I put the oiled toe spacer in, and then you put the sock on over the putty, and then you're gonna do your shoe. So I did one at a time because they set so fast, you know. So basically, before you put it in your shoe, I should have mentioned, because you don't want it to glue to your shoe. So once you put the putty on, you put the sock on, you put the plastic on, keep it from sticking to your shoe, then you put it in your Pointe shoe. You have this awesome bag on your foot. And then I just rolled through, I did a lot of like this kind of stuff. And then I also took a minute to put my other shoe on, so I could actually go up on both feet and just kind of do some roll throughs and that kind of thing. And then balance, you know, this, just kind of working it through. Now, because these were already made, you're not seeing material. You pour out the top, but you'll have extra material pour out the top. And what I did was I basically would just pull out, if you can see that, like I would rip off any excess material. And I also took my other foot and I stepped on the box to push out any extra, because again, this was way too much material on top for the silicone for me. So I squished out all the extra and then I pulled it away, except for the littlest bit. I left a little corner because that's how I knew when it was set. So you roll through, right? You make sure that you go over your toes, you know, whatever you would normally do. You can beret, whatever. But the goal is to have just the littlest bit, and then you leave it in there until it's set. And you actually can leave this one on and then go ahead and work on the other foot while that one's setting. So the same thing would go. You place the putty on the top and the tip, and you kind of make like, think of like a little sleeve of putty on your oiled foot. Then you put the sock over the putty, and then you take the plastic and put it over the putty and the sock, and then you put your foot into the shoe. And then the same goes. So this one is working on setting and probably close to being done, and this one is just now starting. So then the same, you want to roll through. Think of how you would use your shoe, going over, you know, whatever you want to do. I would really encourage doing demi, like trying to do just the toes to kind of work out any, and then again, we're going to step on the box to squeeze out any extra putty. And then you will be able to check, you know, pull off the extra putty except for just a spot, and then you'll be able to check. And then once, how you know it's done is if you push on it and it rebounds instead of just sinks, then you know your putty's done. So then you would take off the plastic, and then this is where you pull off the toe pad, but you leave the spacer. Now the spacer will still sometimes pull out. It doesn't stay in necessarily, but you can see clearly when you do this, you'll notice, you can just pop the spacer back exactly where it was and then put the toe pad on. And the spacer stays because it had a home, right, when you were making it. So it just pops right back in, and then you put the toe pad back on. What I chose to do as well is cut down all this excess because I didn't want it popping out my shoe. So the initial cut of the sock is going to be way higher probably, but once you have the toe pad shaped, you cut down the sock so that it fits nicely under the vamp, right? And that's it. So my biggest tip, I would say, would be to make sure when you're shaping your toe pad to push down on the top of the box, to push down and get as much of this excess, because it's just gonna, as you can see, it just kind of like becomes one with the sock, right? Like it's totally the sock, it comes through the sock and becomes one with it pretty much. So you want this as thin as possible so it doesn't inhibit you from the roll through. And that was my biggest mistake. Because if you can see on this, it's a little thick up here for me. Like I don't want anything like that on top of my foot when I'm trying to dance because it's just hard to feel the roll through. But yeah, so you could make these. I think this was 20 bucks. You know, you probably have a pair of old socks. You probably have plastic bags, and you probably have oil. So in this, I made one pair of the full toe spacer, or toe pads, sorry, with this putty, and I still have enough for probably 2 more pairs. And in addition, hold on, let me grab this. I forgot to mention, so if you use, sometimes, because I made them so thick, I was kind of like, not super sold on it, but I actually took toe socks, like I had old toe socks, and I made custom big toe covers. So sometimes people will have an issue with the big toe getting, you know, squished, or if your second toe is slightly longer, this is a really good option. So I literally use the exact same method to make a big toe gel that's custom to my feet. Now I usually have a spacer in there, so that looks better probably if I show you that way. But it keeps that pressure off the second toe if you have a toe that's slightly longer, or also kind of creates a bridge between the big toe and the second toe. So when it's on point, there's less pressure just on the big toe. So anyway, so you can make custom toe gel caps, or you can make entire custom toe pads. Hopefully this is helpful. I was super excited about it. So let me know if you have any questions. If I missed something, I apologize. Just drop a comment or a note below and I'll respond when I see it. And yeah, so the amazing mold putty, that's the kind I got. And yeah, hopefully it works for you. I think it's definitely worth a try if you have trouble getting comfortable in your shoes, or you feel like your shoes just never quite form to your feet in a way that feels like an extension of your foot. This might be an option. Just make sure to try to use a little less putty than I did. So, all right, thanks so much for watching my video. I hope it was helpful. All right, bye.